Hey, hello there. This is a voiceover over a video I recorded early in the morning. Somehow that video lost the audio. So today I'm looking at question 1272, remove intervals. We have a sorted list of disjoint intervals, and we also have a reference interval called to be removed. Now our task is to basically get rid of all the overlapping between our interval and the reference interval, and we have to return a sorted list of the modified intervals. Um, so looking at the example, we have a list of intervals 0, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 7. The reference interval is 1, 6. So since that the input is sorted and the output has to be sorted as well, we might just process the intervals sequentially. So we can compare the first interval we have 0, 2 with the reference interval 1, 6. We notice that there is indeed a little bit overlap. We have to chop off a little bit on the right hand side to shrink the interval 0, 2 to 0, 1 to avoid the overlap. So as a result, we will put 0, 1 onto the output list. Then we look at the second interval, which is 3, 4, is totally covered by 1, 6. So we get rid of it entirely. Then we look at the very last interval, 5, 7. It also have a little bit overlap with the reference interval. So the overlap happens on the left-hand side. We have to shrink it to 6 and 7 so that the overlap is no longer there. So as a result, we put the two modified interval on the list and return that. Looking at the second example, we have 0, 5, and that's the only list interval we have on the list. The reference interval is 2, 3. We notice that since that now our interval it's longer, actually covers the reference interval, we have to split the interval into two halves, 0, 2, and 3, 5. So it may appear that we have four kinds of scenarios we need to handle, but if we think about this question as a line sweeping kind of question, when we have a line that sweeps through the intervals in the problem space, there can be only two kinds of triggering event. One is that when the line sweeps through the intervals on the left-hand side, the left endpoint, we're going to compare the left endpoint with the left reference line there. If the left side of the left interval is come before the left of the reference, that will trigger this first event. The first event is that we want to put the interval to the list, or we have to shrink it, get rid of the overlap between the right hand side of the interval and the left reference. So we have to take the minimum of the right hand side and the interval right hand side and the left reference. And the part between the left part and that minimum is the part we can put on the list. The other kind of event will be triggered is that when the line sweeps through the right hand side of the interval, we compare this right hand side with the reference right hand side. If now our right hand side is towards the right of the reference, it triggers the second kind of event, which we have to decide. We have to take the minimum between the intervals left and the right hand side of the reference. So that's the two kinds of event will be triggered by if we do a line sweeping kind of motion. What about the other two cases we sort of looked at when we look at the examples? One case is that the interval is longer than the reference. Then the split is basically going to be triggered by the two, handled by the two events triggered individually. So the line sweeps through the left-hand side. It's going to take care of the split on the left-hand side. If the line sweeps through the right-hand side of the interval, it's going to trigger the second event and to chop off the interval on the right-hand side to put that on the list. So even though it might look like a different kind of a beast, but it will be handled by the two cases, two events we have. And this very last case, sort of a situation when the interval is within this reference, there's no event being triggered at all. So since there is no event triggering, we don't put anything onto the list. So it's just very nicely handled this case. Yeah, so I think that's the analysis. Basically, if we do this sweeping line kind of and dealing with only two kinds of event, we reduce the code complexity from 4 different scenarios on to 2. So the code will be much nicer. So the code is basically I'm unpacking the left-hand side and right-hand side for the reference interval, and enumerating over all the intervals, looking at the left and right to see if we can actually trigger one of the two type of events. If the left-hand side is less than the reference left-hand side, it's triggering the first event, where we have to look at the right-hand side to take the minimum between the actual right-hand side and the left reference. So we're gonna put that potentially modified interval onto the list. Yeah, I think I'm just explaining I reinforced why it's the minimum there. So the other event will be triggering is the line is sweeping through the right-hand side of a given interval. So this time, if the right-hand side is larger than the right reference, it will trigger event 2, where we look at the left-hand side of the interval, decide do we have to chop off something, and then we put the modified interval onto the list. So after that, we're pretty much done with this problem. And the nice thing about this line sweeping is basically you reduce the potentially 4 different if logic branches inside the code onto 2. So so it's pretty nice. I don't know what I was doing there, but anyway, that's the problem for today, and I recorded this morning. Yeah, it feels really weird to do voiceover, looking at someone, looking at me, and I don't know what I was doing there, actually. Okay, that's it.